Hey, my name is ShawNshawN. I sell art on ShawNshawN.co. Today we're going to review Spider-Man No Way Home. So this is directed by Jon Watts. 2 hours, 28 minutes, so definitely do not drink anything before you went in here. Like, I just drank a little bit, so I wasn't too bad, but there was some guy jumping around at the end of the film. He's like, "Arr!" Trying to see every little bit of the film. So definitely don't drink anything in this film. You can have food, but don't do anything to drink or eat way before. Actors are Tom Holland as Peter Parker Spider-Man. Zendaya plays MJ, his girlfriend. Benedict Cumberbatch plays Doctor Strange. Jacob Batalon plays Ned Leeds. Jamie Foxx plays Electro. Willaim Dafoe plays Green Goblin. Alfred Molina plays Doc Ock. Andrew Garfield plays the other Spider-Man. And Tobey Maguire plays the third Spider-Man. So you have Peter Parker. His identity is found out in the last film. And so slowly it kind of unravels his whole life. He can't get into school. His friends can't get into school because they know him. And then people are harassing him. They're harassing his mom. And so it's created a lot of different problems. And so he goes to Doctor Strange and he pleads, "Hey, man, can you just write a spell and, make all these people forget me?" And he's like, "All right, I'll do that." And he starts to spell and he's like, "No, what about this person and that person and this person?" And then it's like a 6-layer spell, and then the spell kind of blows up. And Doctor Strange says, "No, we can't. We crushed this. What's it? We're not going to do this spell." And he's like, "Oh, man." But unbeknownst to both of them, they've actually cracked the universe in multi-universes. And so all these different characters from different universes that know Peter Parker or Spider-Man come into the universe. So you have all these different villains from previous Spider-Man films enter into the current Spider-Man world, including other Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is trying to put it all back together and resolve it before the whole universe kind of falls apart. So it's a really great premise for a story, I think, especially for a superhero premise. Usually, on the analysis side, if you have multiple villains, multiple superheroes, the plot can kind of fall apart. I didn't feel like that happened here. It was actually pretty fun to watch, multiple Spider-Man and multiple villains at the same time. I think because they were really well established as heroes or villains before in their own movies. So when you brought them back, it was kind of like, oh man, I forgot about this character and that character. And it's so great to see him again in the character, right? So that was really fun to see all those characters kind of come back to life. You really didn't expect to see like all 3 Spider-Man. I didn't know they were going to throw that in there, so that was really fun. Kind of nice twist. But that was really great to see all the Spider-Man, and at one point they even have Venom in there briefly at the end of the film. So just all these surprise characters just come in, and it just makes the fun really fun. And very nostalgic feel to the film because they all disappear, kind of like similar to Avengers. So it has an Avengers kind of plot if you think about it. So that makes for a really, really strong plot, I think. I'm giving a lot of spoilers here, so... If you wanted to watch the film, you're screwed. There's a dramatic death of one of the characters to make a really impactful feel to the film, similar to how Avengers did when they killed several important characters, and you're like, oh my god, how did they kill those characters off, right? And so you have some of that here, and that really gives a lot of weight to the film, and great twist, and you make it feel like not just a silly superhero, but there's actually, some real seriousness of death weighing on the heroes and the villains, so that really adds a lot of punch, I think, to the film. There's obviously great CGI effects with Spider-Man swinging around. I think they've done a good job since Tobey Maguire on special effects, so nothing really new here as far as... I would just say they've done a really consistent job with the CGI and great effects. They actually kind of exposed the subtle differences between the different Spider-Man, so that was kind of interesting to see as well, because there was differences between the different Spider-Man, and it was funny because I didn't really like Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, but to see him again as Spider-Man, you're like, oh man, Spider-Man's back, Andrew Garfield's like, okay, but I wasn't as attached. But it's interesting because I remember Tobey Maguire when he came out like a long time ago, like 20 years ago. So it was just really cool to see him. Obviously very old and aged, but still looking pretty good for his age. There's also a really sad ending for Spider-Man, who learns a really deep lesson, that comes full circle with the whole story of Spider-Man. So that was really nice. And, I thought they did a really good job of circling different stories and then kind of snap them all together at the very end, which is a really powerful effect. The other really crazy thing is this thing was just completely sold out, like every single seat. I booked it yesterday because I started noticing in other films I've gone to, they started, like, everyone's using their app online now, so they're just booking ahead of time and no one's buying it in person anymore. So I'm like, oh crap, I got to buy ahead of time. So I was buying the day before and it was still like 3 seats left. Couple shows were sold out. I'm like, how the hell did this sell out? It's like Thursday, you know? But yeah, the Thursday show was completely sold out. I expect this to be a real blockbuster, especially once you get really good reviews for this. You know, I really enjoyed it, and I have a critical eye, and I do a lot of movies, so as a movie critic, you tend to be very jaded, but there's, you know, it just really hit you really hard with some of the stories here, I think, especially with loss and, you know, jadedness about life and all that kind of stuff. I'm going through that myself, so I can kind of really identify with that. Yeah, it was just surprising to see this many people, especially with big screen TVs. A lot of cinema hasn't been very competitive, I think, with big screen TV. I mean, you had the flop with, what's that Latino thing Spielberg did? He did West Side Story, which was like, I guess they didn't do it in, they didn't translate to Spanish, or they didn't put subtitles. It's like so funny because there's so few people that speak Spanish and English fluently. I'm one of them, but I don't like musicals, so I'm not going to see it either. So you got people like that don't like music are going to see it. People that don't understand a lot of Spanish aren't going to see it. And most Latinos in America, a lot of them don't speak Spanish. Their parents might have been fluent, but then they're not really fluent at all, so they really can't follow the plot either. Like, what a colossal fail, you know? But, I mean, I'm sure they can correct it in the DVD and the streaming, but, man, what a flop, you know? It's like, but, I mean, Hollywood keeps making these movies over and over again, and with Spider-Man, you can redo a film because a lot of these films, as long as you're using different plot lines, they haven't been done before. You had the Spider-Man as a comic book, and you never really saw them as a movie. And, you know, prior to the late 90s, there wasn't really a possibility to do a really good Spider-Man, a really good Superman, Batman. All those different characters really came about because the CGI caught up and made it possible to do the special events. Batman you could kind of do earlier on because it's more of mechanical stunts, you know, with the car and kind of scaling a building and wings flying. You can kind of create that, but like Spider-Man, you can't really do without CGI. There's just no way. So it's really interesting, all these comic book characters coming to life. And I felt also this film was kind of a slap across the face of Martin Scorsese, who said like, oh, these superhero movies are terrible. They're not film. And I felt like all these comic book kind of directors that make stories like Marvel and DC, you know, they probably get all pissed off and they're like, screw Scorsese, we'll show them how it's done. And this film really has that. The last Spider-Man that had it was with the Miles, where they have a multiverse as well. Spider-Man and cartoon, that was fabulous as well. But this one is equally as good, I'd say. Maybe not as good as that one because that one was had a lot more punch with the artistic side of it because they blended comic book feel with cartoon mixed with, you know, kind of live CGI switched into animation, so it has a really original look for that film. And this is just your classic live action film with CGI on top of it, but really great. Good drama, I think, for a superhero film. You know, you got a lot of depth with the characters as much as you can with the superhero film. And a lot of it builds because they have so many films in their repertoire, so it's kind of like you can really lean against those earlier films, especially with the earlier Spider-Man, the earlier villains. They wouldn't work at all if those films hadn't been filmed before. So you wouldn't have that connection with Dr. Octopus. You wouldn't have that connection with Green Goblin. You wouldn't have that connection with Electro. And all these earlier villains just wouldn't have had the same impact if they hadn't been filmed before. So I think now people are getting a real good rhythm. You know, when Stan Lee started doing the Marvel, he really laid it out really well. I mean, unfortunately, he sold off Spider-Man, so Sony owns it. And then the rest is with Disney, so it's kind of horrible to separate Spider-Man from the rest. Because Spider-Man's part of the Avengers, right? But then he can only be a little bit in there because there's this tussle between these huge titans, Sony and Marvel Disney, right? But, you know, aside from that, it's just like such a great thing they're doing now with these films. You know, hopefully one day they would buy back Spider-Man from Sony, but I can't see Sony ever selling it. It's such a great, great story. It's the strongest selling of Marvel comics, so it's kind of a shame that the best selling part of Marvel is not connected with the rest of Marvel, but it is what it is. You know, maybe one day they'll sort it out. But I think they just did a really great, fun film. They had a great ending scene that comes post-credits, so they did that well, which they haven't really done that recently, but Marvel tries to do that. And so I think they did a really great job overall. I'd just give it like A+ for superhero film. For a general film, I think it's a pretty good action film, maybe a B+A. So it's just definitely really nails it, I think. If you guys want to like it, give me a thumbs up. If you like to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review.